Hey, good evening, everybody. You are listening to the H2G Podcast. This is night number 2. We're doing a Tuesday show. So you guys already heard how my week has been going with my buddy and myself. So I actually wanted to talk about something a little more serious. When it's time to let go, move on. This doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship, but sometimes you have toxic people in your life in general. So I just wanted to talk about that, what if you guys had any experiences you wanted to share and things like that. So I'm just going to start off first. Why not, right? Now, I'm not going to go into too much specifics with this gentleman's story, but my buddy, his girlfriend cheated on him, and they'd been together for about 4 years. And I think the worst part was it wasn't just like she kind of cheated on him. She cheated on him with 24 different individuals while they're living in the same place. 24. And that's only when I say 24 cheated, that's physically had interactions. There are multiple more people she was speaking to in addition to that. So I could go into the details, but the bottom line was this: is she knew going into it that his previous ex-girlfriend had cheated on him. So the first thing he asked her was, have you ever cheated on someone? To which she said no. And then after the fact, and after this was discovered, he asked her again, how many of your boyfriends have you cheated on? And she said, every single one of them. So here's what I want to talk about. Not that. Now, obviously, that's a very extreme example, but I wanted to get into the psychology of what he's dealing with, right? This is one of those things where he's not sleeping right now. He just came over the other day and he's just struggling. And it's one of those things where I just had to kind of tell him, you need to move on, man, right? You need to stop. Because he was just showing me these texts hey, look, I was telling her this and it's this giant thing. And she's going back with these 2-word responses. And I was like, look at the energy she's giving you. Clearly she doesn't care, man. And I understand, you're heartbroken and you love her, but she doesn't care. So what are you're not going to get anything out of asking her these questions when she's not going to answer you. So it's something he's working on, and it's something I hope he can, come to terms with, because at the end of the day, we all run into these things. And one of the conversations he and I had last night was that he had red flags that he saw and he ignored. And he had, he just had feelings in his gut. But what he told me was, well, I didn't have any proof and I didn't want to get gaslighted and just ask her and accuse her and her make me feel like I'm a liar and I'm crazy and I'm angry and this, that, and the other. So he did end up finding the proof, obviously. But nonetheless, the point being is, and this is where I told him, you're in a situation where you see problems, but you love this person, so you're willing to move past it. And then you feel in your gut there are things wrong, and you know better, right? You know when somebody's not acting the way they normally act. And he knew that, right? And so that's what I was telling him is, this is something you can learn from. Obviously, what she did was wrong. We're not going to get into, why she did those things. It's irrelevant to the scope of this. But what I was talking to him about are those things. And he told me his best friends told him they'd finally just started to like her. So that's not a good thing is what I told him, right? You've known your friends for 12 years, and it took them 4 years to say we were starting to like her. So I told him, you need to talk to your friends, right? So the next time you're in a relationship, if they have a bad vibe, there's probably a good reason for it, and they need to be better friends and to be more honest with you, right? And to let you know, hey, I have, something doesn't seem right. So that was kind of the things, I wanted to have that discussion with him about, was kind of learning from it, because, I was cheated on by my fiance. And so I was explaining to him, everything he's going through and all the obsessions he's having right now, I went through it. And we all go through that when people are cheating. We tend to fixate. So I don't think there's anything wrong. And I'm not trying to marginalize his feelings, but that's what I was trying to tell him. You're never going to grow and you're never going to move on until you can let go. So I don't know if you guys have had any situations. And again, this doesn't have to be relationships. I can do another story if necessary, friends, etc. Because at the end of the day, here's kind of my thought process. When I evaluate anybody in my life, the first thing I think about is, what do they bring to the table for me? I don't think about what do I bring to them. It's what do they bring to me first, right? That's how I look at things. Is if this person's in my life, what are they offering me? And again, that's very simple. A lot of the times what it should just simply be is support, right? They're offering me support and care and emotion. But at the same token, that's after the fact. I don't do this audit often. Let me clarify. But then what am I doing for them? And any relationship of any kind, whether, it's platonic, romantic, etc., that's the whole point of it, is you're benefiting. And again, it doesn't mean like if I do something, you should be doing that exact same thing. That like equivalency is so lost nowadays, right? Because I may be better at something than you. So that's maybe what I bring to you, but you might be able to bring something else to me. So it shouldn't always be, when you think of equal is not, we're going to do the exact same actions, because we're different people. But at the end of the day, any relationship should have some sort of balance in terms of they help me in these manners and I help them in these manners. So has there been a situation for anybody on this cast where you've dealt with something similarly in terms of having a problem, and like, how did you work towards it and how did you resolve it? And have you resolved it, if that's the case? I saw Chelsea put her hand up, so I'm gonna let Chelsea go first.
I mean, I spilled the tea last week, so everybody knows that the last relationship that he cheated. And I've had other ex-boyfriends cheat on me. My first high school sweetheart cheated on me. And it was the girl who actually told me, and he denied it to my face. And then there was a guy that I dated in college on and off for a while that cheated on me. And then this most recent relationship also. And when I confronted him, he denied it. I would say the big difference, though, looking back, because high school, college, now, those are all very different phases of my life. I think in high school, it was like overwhelming heartbreak, dealing with depression. It's like that's your first love or whatever. So that it's a hard thing to process. And you do kind of fixate and obsess on it. In college, it was definitely still a very toxic, but we were on and off all the time. I knew the red flags, all of that. And I learned and grew a lot from that situation. This last one, though, I noticed a big difference because my mindset had completely changed. I didn't want to stick around as soon as I found out. As you guys know, I literally moved within a week. I was living with him, had relocated here from Tampa, Florida to be with him, and he cheated on me. And in the span of a week, I had found movers and moved out into an apartment because I have a zero tolerance policy for it. And I think a lot of it is the mindset shift. In the past, I think it's almost not necessarily dependent on them, physically or financially, but looking for that validation, wanting somebody there as emotional support. With my issues with anxiety and depression, I think I leaned heavily on other people, not just in my relationships. Whereas now, with how my mentality has shifted, I don't want to sound super crass, but I don't need anybody. I do not need a relationship. And like Richie said, I'm looking at somebody who can add value to my life, but I don't need them in my life in order to feel validated or be successful or any of that. At that point, it's just, I want you around because I enjoy your presence. And I'm kind of at a stage in my life where I'm not in the right place to really be in a relationship, but I know that going forward, it's going to be a completely different mentality because of what I have gone through. But I think when you are starting to see those red flags, I think your heart wants to kind of ignore them because you're hoping that it's not true. It's if you don't know about it, it's not happening type of thing until something glaringly obvious happens. And then your friend, I was I have to have the proof because I know he's going to gaslight me. I had already asked him if he was cheating on me or if there was somebody else, and he told me no. And it took me getting the proof. And then he still tried to twist it and be well, nothing physically happened, even though I had evidence of that. And so it was just this ongoing series of lies until he realized, oh, she's seen everything. She knows everything. And then he couldn't lie to me anymore. And fortunately for me, I didn't really obsess over it that much. I didn't want to know why, because that wouldn't really change anything for me, even if I did know why. It's not going to change how I feel. It's not going to make me go back to him. It's not, literally knowing why he did it solves nothing for me. I'm still going to move on with my life. And I have my own theories as to why he did it. But quite frankly, sorry for the language, I don't give a fuck. I am in a much better place in my life. It was hard to go through at first, having to find movers and move out. It was a very emotional thing for me, considering I had moved across the country for him. But within probably the span of about a month, I had tried to process all of those emotions and work through it. And I'm in an exponentially better place now after going through that than if I would have stayed or tried to work things out or obsessed and stayed stuck on him or something like that. Like, if anything, if you're listening, ex-boyfriend that I won't name, thank you. I'm much happier in a much better place because of you. So there's my spiel.
Thank you for the spiel. Yeah. I like, for me, I'll say this. It's tricky because I'm going to go to the friend side of things. It's, this isn't always relationships. One of my friends, I also had to remove from my life, and it wasn't from the perspective of like, she did anything wrong. I just got tired of the energy output, kind of what I referred to earlier. And what I mean by that is, we all have different lives, and that's going to be a thing. Like, for instance, Tony has children and a wife, and it's a different amount of energy he can exert because due to his family. So I wouldn't hold that against him. But for instance, in this case, it's one of those things where she'd complain we weren't talking to each other very often, but I always had to call her. So I was like, excuse me, so it was just one of those things where I got frustrated because it's one thing to have to be the person who's reaching out. And that's, it is what it is. You're going to have a dynamic, and it's individual from group to group. And if you feel like you're the one having to do that too often, then you should be voicing it. Otherwise, stop complaining. That's how I feel, because the other person doesn't know, that's something that's bothering you. But what I'm getting at is, it's one of those things where for me with her, and I won't name her name, but we no longer speak. And it's because basically she said I wasn't putting any effort into our friendship, even though I had to call her, check up, and, she never put any energy into contacting me. So it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I just didn't want to deal with it. Because again, that's what we talk about with gaslighting. It's where the other person just intentionally gets you to believe you're doing something, and they're being, manipulative and condescending, and they're lying to you essentially. So again, this doesn't have to be, relationships in the sense of romantic entanglements and whatever they call it nowadays. But yeah, so I don't know if anybody else has gone through anything. Tony, how about you, buddy? You ever had to cut anyone toxic out of your life?
Oh yeah. It's interesting just listening to both of you talk. It made me think of a friend of mine. And I know the question was when do you know when it's time for you to leave a relationship? And his question was more like he was trying to make himself stay in the relationship. And I was telling him, I'm like, listen, why would you want to stay in a toxic relationship when you're not getting anything out of it, except for, the physical side? All he cared about was the physical side. He didn't care about the emotional side or the mental side. She was just good at what she did, and he liked that. But she was doing it with a lot of other people. So I'm like, dude, how is that healthy for you? You want to see her as a girlfriend, but everyone else is utilizing her, skill set for for themselves, and they end up having a kid together. And so now he's trying to make the relationship work because they have a kid. And I said, you cannot make this work with her because she doesn't want to make it work with you, even if there's a kid involved. It took some time. He finally, listened, because I can't, just like Richie can tell me something, but I have to go through it. I have to walk through it, right? He has to take me to the water, but I have to be the one to drink it. So no matter how hard I tried to tell my friend, he needed to see it for himself. And he finally did. For me, man, I was young, I didn't even know what I had until it was gone. And, I liked her. I didn't love her. And she went back to her first boyfriend and slept with him. And she was my first girlfriend, first kiss, first, anything. So I was like, devastated. And, I tried to say, it's fine. It happens. It's a slip up. Let's make this work. And she's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I can't make this work knowing what I did to you, because that means to me that I don't care for you the way that I should care for you, which is another knife that goes into the heart, but it's the truth, right? So, it was hard to let that one go. I ended up living in my car for 2 weeks because I had nowhere else to go, which was a life lesson that helped me out as well. I'm not saying it for people to feel bad. I'm just saying it because that's the reality of it. And, after that, I met someone else and, she cheated on me as well. I think I had this conversation with Richie. I was like, why do these girls keep cheating? What am I doing? Like, what is it me? What do I need to do different? All this other stuff. And Richie just looked at me and, not verbatim, I can't tell you what he said, but in general, he just said, fuck them. Like, they're no good for you. So it doesn't even matter. And I said, okay, it is what it is. And then, I met Carrie. He was there during the Carrie part anyway. So like he knows about Carrie, but I was just talking about all the other girls and how that had happened. And it was 3 of them. It was 3 girls. They all cheated on me. And then I met Carrie. So, when it comes to cheating, you have to understand, and it took me a long time because I used to make excuses. This is the ignorance coming out. So I want everybody to pay attention. I used to make excuses. They're like, well, when people cheated, that's just the society that we live in. That doesn't mean that it should be acceptable. How is that an excuse, Tony? Like, why are you even saying that? And I'm young. I was young with this thought process. Tiger Woods, Martin Luther King, JFK, Shaquille O'Neal. And it's just like, finally that I'm older, it's like, just because they are bad characters or have bad decisions doesn't mean that it should be glorified or that it's acceptable, because it's not acceptable. It takes time for you to actually learn and grow as an individual. And I would have to say that this whole, thought process, it took some time, but I had to understand and respect that if you want to be in a relationship, that's what you need to be, is in the relationship, giving 100% of you all the time, and the other person giving 100% of them all the time. And it's not going to be good all the time. It's a roller coaster. It's up and down. You have to learn to stay neutral, okay? Because the honeymoon phase is going to go. There was a reason why you got together, so there's a reason why you should be together. If you do wrong things and you make wrong decisions, then, obviously Chelsea can attest, Richie can attest, and I can tell you that you're going to have to reevaluate the situation. And Chelsea said, F it, I'm out. For some people, they try to make it work. You do you, but in the long run, I agree with Chelsea. You need to value yourself a lot more than the person that doesn't. Period. So I don't know. I kind of went all over the place with what you asked me, but when this topic came up, that's what came to my mind and came to my heart and what I wanted to share. Most importantly was my friend, because he wasted 6 years of his life trying to make something work that I kept telling him wasn't going to work, because no matter how hard he tried, she didn't care. And that a relationship doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. And the only thing I took at the beginning of that was just he was blinded by the pussy. And I pardon for the language. I know Tony was about to drink, but just so you know, like young fellas out there and women, nobody's that good. Nobody's that good in bed. I'm sorry. It's just reality. I've been around the block. I'm not saying this is a braggadocious thing, but like there is nobody where their skill set in that category is so exceptional that whatever else they're doing that's probably bad is worth that. There's not. And anybody, like, in terms of sex, communication's key. Like, you can grow together and develop chemistry in that. It's just absolutely a thing, right? So somebody who could be better than the other person, that's so out of context. And honestly, I'm not saying there's no value in it, but it's just, that's never a reason to stay. And usually the women or men who, like, that's what they talk their game up, is they don't offer anything else. And, you know, it's very simple, like, in terms of this. The keys to the kingdom, I'll get to you, Tony. The keys to the kingdom are real simple. Regardless of, like, whoever has that power in terms of, like, their body and their physicalness, it doesn't lead to, like, a substantial relationship. It never will. Anything that starts that way is usually really poor. But Tony had his hand up, so I'm going to let Tony go.
And all I want to say to that is that all fades away in the end anyway. You know, all the physical stuff tends to go away. You don't do all that stuff like you used to do, you know. So, I mean, when you're 80 years old, you better be able to have a conversation. You better be able to hold hands. You better be able to do some kisses, because, you know, a lot of times you can't be doing all that other stuff that you think that, you know, how did you put it, Richie? He was blinded by the pussy.
Yes. What was that bean? Wasn't there a bean game or something that we heard about, right?
Yes,
Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we did hear about that, the bean game.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting thing. And for those of you that don't remember, is essentially there was only so many beans. I don't remember the number, 50 something, whatever, who cares? The point being is there's so many beans, and they could have physical relations to the amount of beans that were left. So they take a bean after they had done their business. So there's only so many beans in the reserve. So it really forced them to, you know, connect with each other on a much more deep spiritual and emotional level. And again, I'm not advocating for the bean game. That's a little too much for me. But having said that, I definitely think it builds, and it has the tools to build a deeper, more profound relationship for sure. Justin, how about you, buddy? I know you've gone through a lot yourself, my friend. Share some wisdom with the class.
Well, I don't even know if this is wisdom as much as it is opening up. And I'll just comment because, you know, I like to plug things. H2G Podcast.com, season 2, episode 6, entitled Sex Beans. You'll learn all about the bean game. All right. I know I some of this I've shared, some of it I haven't. I had a rough childhood, and I'll leave that pretty vague. But family was pretty much all I had, even until I got into high school. I dealt with some bullying and things that just had left me to not trust or care about the outside world. It was get my schoolwork done to get home to my family, if that makes sense. That was the mentality I had as a kid. So when I got into high school and I got into theater and music, that changed, and I started to meet people. And by my freshman year, I had that first love. I fell in love. I was actually with her for the next 6 years. And because of my childhood and because of my view, my innocent, I will say a completely innocent all the way in through graduation, still hadn't tried, maybe sipped a beer when I was giving it on my 16th birthday. But you know what I'm saying? I was very innocent compared to my peers. I still had this view of marriage as something to behold that'll last forever. And you get that one love, and once you find it, you hold on to it. So I had built a lot of expectations in that relationship. And sure, there were thousands of ups and downs, probably hundreds of thousands of ups and downs and terrible things that I, red flags, as we called them earlier, that I could have and should have noticed. Several breaks. I don't know why that's not a red flag when you need to take a break and see other people and then come back. Like, what was I thinking? But I gave up for that relationship, and I've changed this in my age. I used to blame it on the individual. I'm not going to blame it on her anymore because of that relationship, because of the way that I coveted what we had. She was my first everything as well. I gave up a lot of scholarship opportunities. I gave up an early attack at my acting career. I could have left Ohio a long time ago and done what I'm trying to do now at 30 when I was 18 and hot and ready to go. but I didn't. I took this relationship super serious, and that wound up with a cheating situation. Some other things that I don't feel so comfortable that made it a little worse, but I think that you fellows might remember I fell off. This was at Wright State when I found out. I found out over the phone, and I went from still seeing the future, still really caring about everything, to the complete opposite. I fell off with you guys off the radio show. That's what led to that. I fell out of acting. I fell out of friendships. I let everything go because I had put all of my stock in this relationship and thinking that this had to be my forever. And the fact that there wasn't a conversation or anything, just over the course of a quick 5-minute phone call, it was done, and she was with someone else. That was already out of my control. I didn't understand that. And so I let it destroy me. It didn't destroy me. I let it destroy me. I chose alcohol. I chose drugs. I chose parties. I chose forgetting about everything, sleeping with whoever, I didn't go crazy. I'm not trying to say that, but I lost all standards. I lost all, it seemed like morals, drive, passion, all of it had gone out the window. I took a series of extremely dramatic, emotionally taxing acting roles for no reason, but to just try to outlet the anger and stuff I was feeling. And that was something that remained a major issue in my life until the past few years. That's how long of an effect it had. So I don't have an answer as to what exactly I could have done differently. But the moral that I've come to learn recently, especially this past year, is that I should have been more focused on myself. I should have understood what good things that I had going for me, not for us, not for the future. I was thinking so much about the future and including everything as a we, all of my whole life that I was actually seeing had somebody else in it. And I didn't choose to be selfish. I didn't choose my career. I didn't choose my passion or anything like that. So, what ended up happening for the next 10 years basically was I found more people just like her. I've been cheated on in, I'd say, the majority, and not all relationships. I've had some that just don't work. And as far as like what to do when you see red flags, or the question that posed the episode, how do you know when it's time to go? If it doesn't feel right, if you have to force the conversation, if you have to force anything in it, and go outside of yourself to make this happen because of one or two, I know I've got friends that will go distance away from who they are just because of how attractive the person they're talking to is. They're like, I've got to get this person because that's the only person I'll ever get that's this hot or whatever. Don't do that. Don't, if you realize that you're taking pieces of yourself away and giving them to someone else, and you're changing pieces of yourself to match the picture of what they're looking for, you're just setting up failure. And it depends on how long that relationship goes, how that's going to turn out, and how, devastating that failure could be. But I don't really know where that came from, but thank you for letting me share.
Well, thanks for sharing, man. I appreciate it. Kind of more to the scope, because I just want to get back into that, because again, that's your experiences. I don't want to try to side commentary how your life went. But what I would say is, I think the thing where you have to focus when you're trying to figure out, is it time to end this relationship, whether it's a friend or a romantic one, is when the respect is no longer there, right? When the respect is no longer there, or when you'd rather be alone than be around them, right? I think those are two big, wait a second, something's not right. So I definitely think that's something people need to start focusing on. So if there's anytime you're questioning yourself, dig deep into it, and just understand that that's what you need to focus on, right? Don't look for things, but the point being is, if you feel it in your gut, I'm telling you, your body, your brain, your soul, you're going to know something's not right. Listen to that. but understand what that is, right? Because obviously you can't articulate to someone like, hey, Justin, we've been friends for 12 years, but something doesn't feel right. That's not the best way to articulate yourself. But nonetheless, you should start thinking about like, what doesn't feel right about Justin and me? Why do I enjoy my time by myself more than when we're around each other? And those are the things you should start focusing on. But I know Chelsea has something she'd like to say, so I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea.
Yeah, just I guess on a general note, this could apply to more than just, relationships, but friends, maybe even work or whatever. Something that I've really been trying to work on is really setting boundaries. I think sometimes, even if it's somebody like that you've been friends with for a long time and it's just becoming really taxing, you should have a conversation with them about something that's going on, but you also may need to just like step back and set some kind of boundaries. And if they can't respect those boundaries, then maybe it's time to end things, because, anytime that you're going through major changes in your life, or even just as you're getting older, like you're going to change as a person. At your core, you might be the same person, but there's elements of you that are going to change and you're going to grow. And especially if you have people that are growing alongside you, it can clash. And I think that's why it's really important to have conversations, but it's also really important to say, look, over the years, I've learned that this is a hard boundary for me and I need you to respect that. And if they can't, that's when you need to have that, self-reflection point of maybe I start, working my way to having them not as close to me or as a big part of your life or something like that, because something that I actually have been kind of saying more and more to people, but I've also heard it a few times too, is be selfish. Like, I know the word selfish gets like a really bad rap, like, oh, she's selfish. No, like you can't give to people what you do not have. Like, you have to be selfish in the sense of recognizing what your boundaries are, what your needs are, like what is it that helps you thrive and be happy. If you can't have those things, you can't give things to other people. So I think it's really important to be selfish in that respect and recognize what it is that's an issue for you and call yourself out on it if you have to, and set those boundaries, do things that are uncomfortable for the sake of your happiness.
Yeah, boundaries are extremely important. I've had people try to infringe on them and encroach them. And there's all kinds of boundaries, whether it's sexual, etc. And so I completely agree. You got to establish boundaries, and like the growth thing. I think that's what gets tricky for long-term relationships is we do evolve, and one of the most common tropes you hear is you're not the person I fell in love with. Well, and that's life. Like we do evolve, we grow, we change because we have different interests, and we grow wisdom, and we change our opinions, right? They're malleable. They don't stay. Like, I would hope when you're 60 years old, you don't have the same opinion on life that you did when you were 18. And if you do, then that's cool. I guess, I'm not trying to say anything bad, but I think the scope of what I would say to kind of close this off, because we've been talking quite a bit about it and we've been sharing, and thank you guys for your stories, is that, you have to be able to love yourself first, right? Like, if you don't love yourself, you're not able to love somebody else properly. And I think a lot of the times when we lose a partner, that's the first we think of is like, what am I going to do without this person? And that's what I was explaining to Joel. I'll say his name. Joel he's not focusing the right way. And that's what I told him is this, if you're thinking about like, what are you going to do without her? No, like, what are you going to do, man? Like, there's so many, so right now, today, I actually inspired him. He's going to completely refurnish his entire apartment because, everything he sees, he thinks of somebody. So I was like, well, that's, let's step one, buy new stuff. Okay. If this new stuff and rearranging the place doesn't work, then you move, because he wanted to move. And I told him, whoa, don't move yet. Buy the stuff first, right? So he's going to buy some new stuff, see how he feels, and then, work towards the other things. And, he's an amazing guitarist, and he just made me look very embarrassed because I have a classical guitar and he just destroyed it last night. And it was one of those things where, why am I not playing as much as he's playing? Like, why can he do that? I can't do that. So that's what I was telling him, man. Get back into the guitar and discover yourself. And I think that's sometimes we lose sight of who we are when we're with our partner. And, even whether you're leaving or staying with someone, that's something that's really important, is don't lose sight of yourself, right? So appreciate everybody and this conversation and this topic. I know sometimes it's not fun to share. I know sometimes it's really challenging, But, you know, I just, too often we all run into these things, and it's important that we're willing to, you know, express ourselves and give our opinions, because again, like, nobody's right or wrong in life. We just have different roads we travel. So thank you guys. And if anyone else has anything they would like to add, please comment on our Facebook. You're listening to us on Spotify, on YouTube. I'm not going to plug the other things because you'll see us tomorrow on The Wire, 7 p.m. We also have a very awesome chat we're going to have with Chelsea tomorrow. She'll be leading that. It's part 2 of the docu-series. So stay tuned, Chelsea. Looking forward to it. If you like, why don't you close us out today so that way we can prep for you tomorrow.
All right. Well, like you said, be sure to join us for that conversation tomorrow. But thank you guys for listening. If you have anything that you want to get out and vent in the comments, please do. This has been the H2G Podcast. See you guys tomorrow.